have been on this stage quite a few times over the last few years in front of a crowd, a lot like you all. The only difference, and yes, before you ask, that does include the clothes, is that I usually have my French horn with me. That round, shiny thing I usually get to use to distract you all with. My instrument and music has become such an important part of my identity and existence that I had no idea how to approach going up on a stage and not playing Mozart. There was some relief, but mostly panic was settling in. They've taught me about stage presence, but not so much about public speaking in music school. But here we are, it's probably almost a minute in, and I think it's going well so far. So when it came down to it, I thought it would be best to take you on a journey through my life the way I would take you on a journey through music. I'm standing here tonight, so I can promise you that there is a happy ending. I was born into a very strict religious household, specifically Jehovah's Witness. My single immigrant mother had the job of raising 3 children in a country she hardly knew how to navigate. But even though we grew up poor and lacking a lot of resources, she was able to form a loving community through her religion that taught us a great deal about discipline and being model citizens. But there were conditions to being a part of that world. They had very clear rules and set of expectations that you had to abide by to reap any, if all, of the benefits. Something I had no problem doing until I began to discover who I was. Around 12 years old, like most kids, I had developed my first crush. I had just started the 6th grade, and I couldn't wait for band. Both my siblings were musicians, and it piqued my interest about music. Band finally came around, and as we were choosing our instruments, I turned around, and there he was, our bass clarinet player. Cute, right? Now I think so, but back then I was mortified. My whole world came crashing down in about 2 seconds on my first day of middle school. I couldn't be gay. I read the Bible every day. I prayed at least 7 times a day. I went to church 3 to 4 days a week. I preached door to door every weekend. I wasn't allowed to be gay. That wasn't supposed to be in the cards for me. I felt like the universe had just ripped the rug out right from underneath me. I was on the floor, and I needed to get up. So like any sensible person would do, I started reading the Bible twice a day. I started praying 14 times a day, started going to door to door during the week after school. I was in a full-blown panic mode trying to create an impenetrable shield where I could hide the fact, even from myself, that I was what they called an abomination. Nobody could find out. As the year went on, I fell in love with band, but I still thought the bass clarinet player was cute. So the following year, I begged to be withdrawn from school and started homeschooling. My plan was to isolate myself from the world, from my friends, and from my family. Did it fix anything? No. All I had really accomplished was to make myself feel lonely. At 14, when I decided enough was enough, I thought I was ready to come out, to take a leap of faith in hope of living a more honest life for myself, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Shortly after shakily uttering out the words, "I'm gay," to my mother, I was put in a room with our church leaders explaining to me the consequences of taking this path. I'd be disowned forever from my family, from my friends. I would be cast out of my home and expected to start over my life from scratch. At 14, about to start high school, I obviously wasn't ready for that. So I lowered my head, took back my words, and continued on like nothing had ever happened. Mine and my family's reputation was at stake, and I had nowhere else to go, so I had to fly under the radar and come up with a plan. Fast forward a few years, and the summer of my junior year, it was time. My father and I had started to form a closer relationship, and he had offered to have me move into his home. That was my way out, and I needed to take action. That same weekend, on the Sunday after church, I took the biggest risk that changed my life forever. I was back in the same room with my mother and the church leaders as when I was 14, but this time I wasn't going to back down, and I would not take back my words. But neither were they. The next day, I moved out of my mother's house and never looked back. There is always going to be a fork in the road where you have to ask yourself, what now? That day, I chose the road less traveled, and in doing so, taught myself the most valuable lesson I have ever learned. As long as you choose to stay true to yourself, you have the power to overcome anything. The same summer I lost everything, my life started. I won principal chair of my local youth symphony, along with a scholarship to start taking private lessons. I competed at the regional level and qualified to compete at the state level, where I placed highly. I started traveling for music festivals and won my very first concerto competition right here. Life started taking off on a new path, and it was starting to unfold with every step I took. I had been pouring every emotion into my instrument and using music to cope with the injustices of my life, all while being unaware that I was developing myself into an artist and a musician. And I was all of a sudden being surrounded by people who were accepting of me and my new ideas when I needed it the most. I graduated high school, and a few months later, I was working as a substitute horn player for the Newport Symphony alongside my teacher at the time and the person who would become my teacher here at PSU. I was on track to start my music performance degree on a scholarship, and I couldn't have been more grateful. I decided to take the risk of discovering who I was, and I continued to be met with acceptance and encouragement. Now, was that the end of the road? Absolutely not. It wasn't even close, but it was definitely a beginning. I continued to fall and get back up, sometimes because I jumped and sometimes because I was pushed. But each time I emerged as a more genuine self. Here's another story for you. At the end of each term, we have what is called a jury. Throughout the term, you work on a piece, let's say Mozart, and you present it to a panel of judges, and they mark your progress and give you a grade. During these juries, I view them as my time to shine. I get a moment to present myself and my ideas the way that I would like to, so of course I always wear something extravagant, much like my outfit tonight. Now, it isn't every day that you see a male horn player with anything other than slacks, a button-up, and a blazer. But there I was in a pair of women's shoes, embroidered pants, and a frilly shirt playing my Mozart. Now, I got an A, but afterwards I was told by my private instructor that some of the panel members had some concerns. They had asked him, if Santi had a job interview, don't you think he would wear something a little more professional? Fair question, right? My teacher quickly remarked, though, no. If they did require that, he wouldn't take the job. My drive to be my most genuine self was being questioned once again, but now I had allies to stand by me without me having to ask them to do so. The world of music that so genuinely saved my life so many years ago became my new family that protected me and nurtured me into becoming the person that I am standing in front of you today. A queer, brown, first-generation American who was able to and will continue to be able to live out his impossible dreams. Now, since I have you trapped, I'm going to share with you one more thing. I'm going to have you listen to the Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber, recorded by myself and my brass quintet here at PSU. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it. And this piece really helped me get through one of the darkest times of my life. If you've heard this piece, that's great, and if you haven't, that's even better, because I want to teach you how I listen to this piece, so that we can all share this moment on a much deeper level. I want you to close your eyes and think of the person that hurt you the most in this world. Take a moment, visualize them, even if it's difficult, and remember their pain. For me, that person was my mother. She told me that she would rather die than see me become who I was. I knew in that moment that even if she didn't die, to be truly happy, I was going to have to lose my mom. The beginning of this piece represents that pain, where everything feels hopeless and like you have to know where to go. But life never stops, and at some point you have to take that leap of faith. I don't have to tell you when that point is because you'll feel it in the music. Unfortunately, the pain never does go away, but just like the music, life goes on. Enjoy.